To my channel YW and 1H. Today we are talking about telco data. So let's get right into it. What is telco data? Data or information generated by telco companies from user interaction with their services. So in this scenario, who is the data owner? Data owners are all the top companies, all the top telecom companies or small telecom companies are the data owners for this. And who is the data generator? We are the data originator, the customer, the the general public like you and me who uses the sim card or other telecom services to do our day-to-day activity. And what kind of data we are talking about? So first is tenure with the telecom. So the kind of relationship we have with the telecom, how many years you have hold the sim card, how many times it was inactive, active, all this information is there. Then the call records. So of course telecom companies cannot share your voice recording with anybody except the government, but they do have high level information that how many calls you have received, how many calls you have picked up, you are receiving call from what kind of companies. Those high level information they have it. Similarly SMS records. So of course they cannot take your SMS data dump and send it to anybody, but they telecom companies do have this information, which is how many SMS you have received, how many messages you have opened, how many messages are unread, and how many what kind of messages, which kind of entities you are receiving these messages, so the sales and all those things. So these categories are data categories are at a very broad level. There is like within each category there is like 20, 30 more segments of variable that you can create out of it. Next is the location. So what kind of location you are living in, what is the population there, and all those things can be extrapolated. Then lastly the service usage, that is the top up you do, the balances you maintain, the data usages that you do, all those things are getting captured. So why is telco data important? Telco data is important for customer profiling. And why the customer profiling is important? Customer profiling is important because customer profiling in every company helps in identifying the correct customer base for their product. So customer profiling happens based on the revenue or the spend. It happens based on the locality and demographic. It happens based on the data usages that you do, and it can happen based on the contact activity that you are doing, whether it's on social media or it's a phone, or SMSs, all those things combined together. So now, how would the customer profile look like? So one of the example is high spender. So based on the income, either you can be high spender or low spender. Based on the pattern of the income, either you can have the stable income or you may have the unstable income. Similarly, if the kind of locality you are living in, that can also be captured through the geo satellite data and all those things. So that becomes another point. Fourth is if you are using too much data or too little data, then accordingly your scale from digitally savvy to novice can come into picture. So these all things can be captured from telco data based on the broader level of variables that we discussed in the previous uh, screen. So now we know what is telco data and why is telco data important. Now the next is when and how, where and when we collect the data. So we collect the data. So since telecom company are the owners of the data, so anything that is owned by the company or we interact with the company is where data is collected. So cell towers, most of the data is collected from there. Then there's a data center in the backend where the data is getting processed, your call, request, message, everything is getting processed there. Then the mobile device that you are using for the interaction, those data is getting captured. Then the billing system where you're paying the bill, those information are also getting captured. And lastly, the online portal and apps where you go and do the interaction, their events is also captured by the telecom companies. Now when they do it, anytime when you interact through your phone or you interact with the telecom company, those data gets captured. So why I put this into two separate categories? You might be paying the bill of the company, of the telecom service provider through cash. So that may not get captured through your phone, but that will capture through the backend system. So all this location updates, service activation, whenever you do any activity, those data gets captured. Now the next question come, who uses this telco data? Like, we understand that telco data is, we do generate the telco data as a user, and this data has been collected and stored by these telco companies, telecom companies. But who needs this data? Almost every B2C company needs this data. They want to generate customer profile, they want to target the customer better, so they want to understand through different data sets how my customer base is. So first is understanding of the customer base. Second is that targeting the customer base with the personalized offers. You don't want to receive or offer of kids toy when you are not married or you are very, very young. So all those things into comes into picture. Then of course, if you talk about the business from the sales perspective, if you have 20,000 records of the customers and you have to call them, you cannot prioritize whole 20,000. You need a way to do it, find out the most important 300, 400 customers. So how that can happen? That can happen through this telco data. And again, you have some data as a company, you have some understanding of your customer, but you need to validate that. You should validate that with other data sets, so that before you launch a marketing campaign or new product, you should be sure about it. So that's where the telco data comes into picture. So I take the example of bank and fintech. So of course, bank or fintech works on the credit bureau score. So imagine if credit bureau score is not there, this telco data can become the substitute for that. The telco data through machine learning algorithms can generate a score which can mimic the behavior of credit score. Now that score can be used for pre-qualification, loan offerings, and once loan is sanctioned and you are and the customer is using the loan, telco data can serve as the early warning indicator of if customer may default, looking at the behavior of the customer on those telco data. Now we know that what is telco data, how it's when and where it's collected, what is the use case of it, and lastly, how the telco data is analyzed. So I took the example of bank of fintech to provide that information. So that's where through the usage of various methods, telco data is analyzed. One of them is data mining and machine learning to find out hidden patterns and trends. Then there is a clustering and segmentation that helps in grouping the customer base based on the behavior. Then predictive analytics to create the future trends, looking at the past data. Then of course there's a very critical element of visualization that you do for various segments to understand it better. And finally, the privacy consideration. So you need to these data points to ensuring data anonymization and security also. For that we use it. So in this topic we covered, one of the key and important point is that before telco telecom company shares this data with any business, they need to get a consent from the user. So that consent can be in two ways. It could be part of the terms and services condition, or it could be explicit one pager consent that you have to sign either digitally or through physical means. So that's a very critical piece. Without that, your data should not be shared with the client. If the telecom is doing that, that's illegal, that's wrong. Okay, thanks for watching. If you find this video useful, please do put some comments in so that we know we can make our video better in the future. Thanks a lot. Bye.